Welcome to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast, the show that explores the background of Tolkien's amazing world from the very beginning. Those of you who are very familiar with The Hobbit know that we are moving through Chapter 2, which means we're getting closer and closer to the situation with the trolls. And I'm excited to talk about this on today's episode because the trolls in this part of the story are peculiar. Have you thought about it? Have you gone through all the rest of the work that Tolkien has done and then ever come back to this situation and then thought about it? These trolls are on a forested hill not too far from the Shire, speaking in common and wearing clothing. Not only that, but one of them has a magic purse in his pocket. Very peculiar. So let's get into it, because we're going to crack open the trolls and see what's in here. That's actually pretty gross, but I'm going to leave it in. Here we go. So the weather is terrible. It's raining. The dwarves and Bilbo are grumpy, and they're looking for a place to camp. So they decide to go under a group of trees. And this section is interesting. It says, though it was drier under them, the wind shook the rain off the leaves, and the drip drip was most annoying. And I love that he puts drip drip. He doubles up a word that comes across kind of humorous and light in a way, even though the situation is annoying and not fun for the party at all. But it also shows, I think, that Tolkien had spent some time camping or in the military, being in situations where you are trying to stay dry, trying to make a camp, and you're hoping that the trees will bring some shelter, but the drip drip keeps coming down from the leaves. This is a person who's experienced this before. The dwarves can make a fire almost anywhere out of anything, wind or no. This is very interesting here in almost the next line. But they could not do it that night, not even Owen and Glóin, who were especially good at it. This again reinforces the fact that these dwarves are world travelers. Maybe not the entire world, but they spend a lot of time out in the wilderness. They spend a lot of time fending for themselves and taking care of themselves in situations where they need to build fires. So they're very adept at that. And then in the very next paragraph, we find out that one of the ponies takes fright, quote, at nothing, and bolts. I find this particularly interesting as well. It's not uncommon for horses or ponies to get frightened by things and to go running off because, who knows, a mouse runs by or the wind hits the tree in a certain way and kind of spooks them. Like this is a very normal thing. But I think in some ways it is foreshadowing that there is something dangerous out there, and maybe the ponies can sense it. And of course the pony runs off into the water, and Philly and Killy are nearly drowned trying to save the pony and all the things on the pony, and so much of it goes down the river, and they lose a lot of their food especially. And of course this doesn't help the already down mood of the dwarves. But then they see a light. Balin notices it in the distance. He says there's a light over there. And there was a hill with some trees on it, and they could see this light shining from between the trees. It's described as a reddish, comfortable looking light, which I think implies a campfire. What else would be more comfortable looking out here in the wet wilderness than a nice campfire to help warm them up and dry them off? And then of course they debate about this. Some argue yes and some argue no. Some say they should go see it. And then the argument is made, and I think this is interesting, that anything was better than little supper, less breakfast, and wet clothes all night. And I have to wonder which one of them is making that argument, because it doesn't state. But it seems like this is more of a Bilbo argument than anyone else, even though you would imagine that Bilbo would be very careful. He doesn't like adventure. He's out here in the wild for the first time, really ever experiencing anything like this. But the note that anything is better than little supper, less breakfast, and wet clothes and being uncomfortable sounds like an argument from somebody who's used to being very comfortable and well fed. Now, it could have been made by one of the dwarves as well, but I think it's kind of a Hobbit-esque kind of argument. But you could argue against that, saying that he probably wouldn't say that because he wants to be safe. And then the argument goes on, and we learn a little bit about this area. The parts are not well known. They're close to the mountains. Travelers seldom come this way now. And also, the old maps are no use because, quote, things have changed for the worse and the road is unguarded. The roads used to be guarded. This seems peculiar as well. How many roads, especially in previous time periods of human history, were regularly guarded? That seems odd to me. Or it seems like the kind of argument that you would make if you were used to guarded roads because you were closer to the fortified locations of a kingdom, like a major town or, who knows, a palace, something like that. And that may follow because the very next line says, they have seldom even heard of the king round here. And this is noteworthy as well. Which king? As we learn about in The Lord of the Rings, the king of Gondor / and or Arnor hasn't been around for a very, very long time. And the way this is written, have seldom even heard of the king around here, kind of presupposes that the king is still alive, that this king that they're referring to is a living person that they should know about because they still hold authority over these lands. But yet, that doesn't make any sense. This area may have at one point been under Arnorian rule and eventually under the Witch King's rule, but it seems like a pretty odd line, right? Like it seems like the kind of thing that Tolkien may have gone back and edited in some way to make it kind of square up with the rest of his works, but he doesn't. He just leaves it here. So maybe there were smaller kings and smaller little kingdoms about in different parts of Middle-earth that we just don't even know about. For example, the dwarves themselves. Thorin is supposed to be in line to be the king of Eriador. That is its own little kingdom. So maybe that is what they're referring to, but probably not. Or maybe something similar to that. And eventually they decide that they're going to go check this out. And then they also start to wonder, where has Gandalf got to, is the question that gets repeated by multiple of them. And I talked about this a little bit on the last episode. I think we're at a point where we are starting to understand that Gandalf will not always be with the party when something dangerous or important seemingly happens. And so they creep up to this hill very carefully, and it's wooded, and they're looking around. We're getting some details here about what this place may or may not be like. They're trying to figure out what kind of fire is this. And then we learn that there's no proper path to be seen, such as might lead to a house or a farm. So we're given the evidence here that this is not a potentially friendly dwelling. This is probably more like a campfire. We're also told that it is pitch dark. And I love the imagery of them creeping up this hill in the pitch dark, trying to be as quiet as they can, trying to understand what it is that they're approaching. And in the darkness, all of a sudden they get close enough for the fire to shine between the trees. And it's bright. It's a very bright red light that comes shining between the trees. And that's the moment they're like, okay, we're close enough. Where they're like, hey, Bilbo, you're a burglar, right? Maybe you should go check it out. Specifically, they say, you must go on and find out all about that light and what it is for, and if all is perfectly safe and canny. And the use of the word canny here, I think is fun because it's one of those words we don't use very regularly. The first time I noticed the word canny, I think I was probably a young teenager reading the Uncanny X-Men comics and thinking, that's a funny word. What does that mean? Well, the actual definition for canny means having or showing shrewdness and good judgment, especially in money or business matters. It can also mean pleasant and nice, and it comes from Northern English or Scottish. So maybe in a way, it being safe and canny means that this is not just a safe thing, but it would be wise or shrewd to engage with it and to continue moving forward, or not. And Thorin's line here to Bilbo is funny as well. Now scuttle off and come back quick, if all is well. If not, come back if you can. Which I'm sure doesn't reassure Bilbo very much at this point. If you can't, hoot twice like a barn owl and once like a screech owl, and we will do what we can. And this is an interesting line to me because, of course, it comes across humorous. This feels like another one of those lines that's inserted in order to get a giggle from the kids you would be reading the story to. But it also shows that the dwarves themselves may be using some clever ways of using sounds or signs or symbols in order to communicate beyond just language. They've been in situations like this before. The humorous bit here continues a little bit longer, and it says, off Bilbo had to go before he could explain that he could not hoot even once like any kind of owl any more than fly like a bat. I can imagine Tolkien's kids giggling as he reads this to them. But then the paragraph quickly transitions to some details about hobbits that haven't exactly been revealed, at least not in this way yet. It says, but at any rate, hobbits can move quietly in woods, absolutely quietly. They take a pride in it, and Bilbo had sniffed more than once at what he called all this dwarvish racket as they went along, though I don't suppose you or I would have noticed anything at all on a windy night. There's several levels to this so far. So first of all, hobbits can absolutely move quietly, and it's something they take pride in. I would imagine that this would be some sort of game they would play in their youth, where they would play hide and seek in the woods and sneak up on each other and that sort of thing. Because it doesn't seem like something that's particularly beneficial to most adult hobbits who are going about their days, doing their jobs, things like that. Also, we learn that Bilbo has been critical of the racket that the dwarves make, dwarves being obviously bigger and a little bit, I guess, louder in general, which seems to track so far for the way the story has shown us the dwarves, but also that you or I wouldn't have noticed a thing on a windy night. This puts a very distinct line between us and dwarves and hobbits. The characters, the races, the peoples that we are engaging with in the story are again foreign to us. This is reinforcing that. And if we were to be out on a night in a forest and these dwarves and this hobbit happen to be nearby, we wouldn't even know it, which lends a fun perspective on this for the wonderment, I guess, of kids and wondering, like, well, are they still out there? If I wouldn't have noticed them, then they might be out there. It makes you look out your windows into maybe the nearby wood a little differently. And then the next line is good too. Not if a whole cavalcade had passed 2 feet off. So yeah, they could all be marching 2 feet away in the forest and we may not even hear them. As for Bilbo walking primly towards the red light, I don't suppose even a weasel would have stirred a whisker at it. Again, reinforcing that hobbits can make themselves practically silent. Animals have better hearing than humans, and some animals have extraordinarily good hearing because they use it for finding their prey, for being able to eat and survive in the wild or avoid things that want to eat them. And a weasel is something with very good hearing, and yet Bilbo could sneak by a weasel? It's kind of an incredible feat, but I guess we have to take it as true. Unless this is an embellishment by the author of the book himself, being Bilbo, which I think is going to come up a little bit more as we continue through this story. So he sneaks up, he gets right up close to the fire, and he confirms a fire it was, it says in the text, without disturbing anyone. And this is what he saw. And I love that the narrator leads with that. And this is what he saw. They've been building to this moment. And then now we're going to get the reveal. But we're going to have to talk about that after the mid-break, so don't go anywhere. I'll be right back. It's time for that spring reset. I'm taking a look at everything in my closet and figuring out that, oh no, this absolutely needs to go. And it's about time I replace things so that my clothes aren't older than my 15-year-old. Now you might think that they lasted that long because they were well made, but no, they're in terrible condition. Unlike the new jeans I just got from Quince. Jeans have always been my personal go-to because you can kind of wear them for lots of different things, but maybe they're not your thing. Maybe you're looking for, 100% European linen with insanely soft flow knit activewear fabric. It's definitely getting warmer, and their flow knit activewear is moisture wicking, anti-odor, and soft enough that you'll actually want to wear it every day. So pick out what you want. You can't go wrong because they have prices 50 to 60% less than similar brands. And like I said before, they are high quality. I continue to wear their clothes all the time, and I know that these new jeans are going to last me a lot better than the other things in my wardrobe. And on top of it, they look great. They're so comfortable, and I spent just as much on the jeans that I am now cleaning out of my wardrobe. So if you're looking for something better, just all around better, go check out Quince. So go do it right now. Refresh your wardrobe with Quince. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Now available in Canada too. Go to quince.com/ringslore for free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/ringslore. Thank you for tuning in and being a part of this show, and big thanks to Jesse A., our newest Patreon. Patron, not Patreon. Some people say newest Patreon, but Patreon is the site. Patrons are the people who subscribe to your stuff on the site. At least I'm pretty sure that's the way it is. Correct me if I'm wrong, because I've been saying it wrong for years if that's the case. But welcome, Jesse, and I hope you're enjoying the ad-free episodes, the bonus episodes, all the other stuff that you can get on the site. And as usual, we have to shout out all of our VIP patrons: AK Music Lover, Apollo, Aragorn III, Alte Morton, Azel Razzle, Barney D, Bo, Black Squirrel, Brandy D, Cutter Metalworks, Daniel Nightweaver, David S, David M, Divine Madman, Fulcrum, Gimli Break, Gemma Deep, Jesse P, Jezer, Katie S, Capenna, Lori B, Mason Weathertop, Nick K, Nostrils of Sauron, Richard J, Rivqua, Rosie Rose, Sam B, Seju, TJT, and Tour Son of Hur. Thank you so much to all of you. And we've got a new review. Patreon.com/LOTR Lorecast is the site that I was just talking about, but I didn't say it, but now you know it. And we've got a new review. If you leave a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, I'll read those out on a future episode of the show. Like this one. It's short and sweet. It's from KTiger112 in the US, who writes 10 out of 5 stars. That's like a 200%. Amazing. Can't recommend this podcast enough. It explains the complicated lore of these books in a simple, easy to follow way. This is by far my favorite podcast. Very much worth a listen. Oh, thanks so much, K-Tiger. Thank you so much to everybody who supports the show, and those of you who leave 5-star reviews on Apple and Spotify or whatever other platform you're listening to this on, and those of you who especially share this with your friends, especially as we get closer and closer to season 2 of The Rings of Power. I would love if you happen to be having conversations with family or friends about that show and you want to help them understand more about Tolkien's world, please recommend the show to them, because I think they might enjoy it. I mean, if you enjoy it, they'll probably enjoy it, right? Thanks for your support, everybody. All right, let's move on with the rest of the story. Here we go. So we're finally at it. The trolls. We're at the troll moment. 3 very large persons sitting around a very large fire of beach logs. That's the first line we get describing them. First and foremost, these are people. Tolkien makes that absolutely clear. Very large persons. And after reading the rest of the works and going through all the terribleness and the nature of the orcs and all of those kinds of things, and the trolls that we meet in other stories, these are people. And I think that's something that's absolutely worth debating about the nature of these evil type people creatures. And it's something that I've talked about in the bonus episodes previously about how Tolkien was not really comfortable with the way that had been handled in his work and how they got the way they did. Are they irredeemably evil? He didn't want to believe that and never quite finalized those lore details. But these are people. They're not monsters. They're terrible people. They're big people that like to eat smaller people, but they're people. And here they are toasting mutton on long spits of wood. And now we get a sense of why the chapter is titled the way it is. But that betrays our perspective from reading the title before we got into the chapter. If you're like me, you probably read the titles of chapters and you can probably get a sense of like, okay, what are we about to experience? Well, roasted mutton is something that's supposed to be comfortable and remind you of home, especially now that we know these characters have set out on this journey. But here they are approaching 3 trolls, and they're the ones with the mutton. It's kind of a juxtaposition of expectations. We also get this wonderful word. There was a fine toothsome smell. Toothsome, as in, I guess it resonates with your teeth in your mouth. And the actual definition of this is temptingly tasty. It's one of the definitions. It's one of those phrases we don't use very much anymore. But I think maybe the next time my mom makes me a meal, invites me over for dinner, I'll be like, hey, this is a very toothsome meal. Thanks, Mom. She'll probably look at me like I'm weird, but yeah, I guess that's normal. The situation continues. They're drinking out of jugs. They're cooking their food. Again, confirmation of them being people. And we are told that they are trolls. Obviously trolls. Even Bilbo, in spite of his sheltered life, could see that. And then we're given a description here. They have great heavy faces. Their size and the shape of their legs. I would imagine they must be very massive legs to carry very massive sized people. And not to mention their language. And this part is interesting as well, which was not drawing room fashion at all. And I think that's another point of humor being added into what appears to be dire situation for Bilbo. But then we get this. Mutton yesterday, mutton today, and blimey, if it don't look like mutton again tomorrow, said one of the trolls in my best sort of Cockney attempt at an accent. But they are speaking in a language that the dwarves and Bilbo can understand. They are not speaking a dark speech. They are not speaking a troll speech. They are speaking the common language. Now, I have to imagine that Tolkien did this for a few different reasons. First of all, if they were speaking amongst themselves in a language that the dwarves and Bilbo could not understand, maybe Gandalf would understand it, but the rest of them couldn't, it would be kind of dense for us to follow as readers. Tolkien also wants this group to be able to hear what they're talking about and for us to get a sense of who they are and what they want. And that couldn't happen if they were speaking in a language that we couldn't understand too, unless the narrator translated it for us. But even then, remember, these are stories relayed by Bilbo. If Bilbo didn't understand what they were saying the first time, there's no way he would have understood it later when he wrote down the story. Now, we're also given this accent that they have, and we haven't really seen an accent among the dwarves and Bilbo and Gandalf yet. They all seem to speak in their own ways, but with roughly the same pronunciations. And this even applies to the different dwarves in Thorin's care. Thorin speaks at kind of an elevated kind of level, but not in a different accent from the other dwarves, at least not that we've been shown. And yet these trolls have an accent. Why is that? Well, one justification is that the Cockney accent, especially if you grew up in the UK, would have been associated with more working class people. If you came from certain cities, and every city in the UK kind of has its own accent, especially if you go back decades, then that would have been something that you, as the reader, would have associated. So are the trolls actually talking in a Cockney accent? Maybe. But was this written in a way for the reader to associate these as working class peoples? Absolutely. that was done very much intentionally. Now, I don't think it means that working class people are evil. What it means is that these are common types of people. These are regular, run-of-the-mill, everyday, blue-collar kinds of people. And if we weren't given this, then the concept of them being trolls might be, there's got to be a word for it, foreignizing would be a thing that we would see and go, okay, they are clearly distinctly different than us. But by giving them an accent that's familiar, that makes them more like us. Again, it reinforces the fact that they are people, just like other people that you might run into anywhere. So Bilbo creeps up on them and they're having an argument and they're talking about how they haven't had a blinking bit of man flesh in a very long time, which we just learned that they're people means that they are absolutely terrifying people because they're gigantic and they are monster-like, even though they are also people-like. Now, how exactly monster-like are they? How scary are they? Well, they're debating about food and eating people, and then William responds to the other two and says, and I'm going to save you from my accent again, he says basically, you've eaten a village and a half between you since we came down from the mountains. What more do you want? Now, this makes me also wonder. I think this is probably supposed to be humorous and like, oh no, scary trolls. They ate a whole entire village. That's crazy. Or a village and a half. But which village? Where was this village? And we also get a sense that they live up in the mountains, that they are way far away from where they would have been, maybe because they were hungry. The argument goes on, and then we get this little detail here. He took a big bite off a sheep's leg that was roasting and wiped his lips on his sleeve. These are clothed trolls. They're not just wearing loincloths or pants. They have shirts. They have sleeves. Somebody is making troll clothing somewhere. Makes you wonder. And then the very next line, it says, yes, I'm afraid trolls do behave like that, says the narrator. Even those with only one head each, which also implies something weird about trolls, that oftentimes they come with two heads. Or is that a joke for the reader? Because a reader might have heard of multi-headed trolls in fairy tales, even if that may or may not be true or common in this world. And then the attention focuses back on Bilbo. We get his debate about what he should be doing, and you can see that he's still trying to prove himself as a burglar. He has this justification. A really first-class and legendary burglar would at this point have picked the troll's pockets. This is what he's thinking. Now, we know that Bilbo is very well read and very little experienced in the way the world actually is. So is this a thought that comes from literature? In the stories that he's read, this is what a legendary burglar may have done? Because it doesn't seem like it's the kind of thing that most legendary burglars would even be willing to do unless there was a very good reason for approaching these trolls. And then the justification goes further. He says, it is nearly always worthwhile if you can manage it. How would he know that? Pinched the very mutton off the spits, purloined the beer, and walked off without their noticing him. It seems like a high bar to hit to be able to steal all of those things from these trolls and have them not even notice that those are gone. And then he continues. Others, more practical but with less professional pride, would perhaps have stuck a dagger into each of them before they observed it. So think about that for a minute. Do you think sticking a dagger in these gigantic trolls is going to do a whole lot? I would imagine it would have to be in a very specific location for it to actually be effective. And also, all three of them? Clearly, this is his imagination here. And then he justifies it. Then the night could have been spent cheerily. And then the very next paragraph, get this. Bilbo knew it. He had read of a good many things he had never seen or done. This line confirms that everything in the previous paragraph was his imagination built on the stories that he'd read rather than any real experience. And then he thinks back about going back to Thorin specifically and company empty-handed, and he realizes that that's not really an option. And so the combination between not wanting to disappoint the dwarves And all of the fairy tale ideas he has about exactly what a burglar would do, which seem kind of ridiculous, ends up motivating him. And you can tell that he's debating exactly what to do. And then he lands on this. Of the various burglarious, wonderful word, proceedings he had heard of, picking the troll's pockets seemed the least difficult. So at last he crept behind a tree just behind William. So he's like, okay, I'm not going to stab them. I'm not going to steal all of their beer and their food, but maybe I could just sneak something out of a pocket. I think I can do that. Which was probably a good thing to land on, because it does seem like something he might actually be capable of pulling off, especially with exactly how quiet we were just told that hobbits can be. And so he waits for the opportune time, and he sneaks up. He reaches in William's enormous pocket, again reinforcing just how big these trolls are. And there was a person in it, as big as a bag to Bilbo. So imagine a regularly sized purse that we would probably call a wallet today. Something that would fit in your pocket and would carry your money. And to Bilbo, this was the size of a bag. So think of like a travel bag, something like that. Again, giving us a sense of exactly how big these trolls are. And then he thought, okay, I got this. This is a beginning. Like, he's doing it. I'm doing it. I'm being a burglar. He feels proud of himself. But then we get this. Trolls' purses are the mischief, which has to be a phrase back from Tolkien's time, because today you would say something like trolls' purses are mischievous and magical or something like that. And this was no exception. It goes on. Who are you? It squeaked as it left the pocket. The purse talks. This is a little ridiculous, right? Like, this is a magical purse and it talks. But remember, Tolkien was writing a fairy tale. And in fairy tales, things like purses can talk. It's just the nature of the magical world. And we'll probably never get an actual official description as to what this purse was. Why can it talk? How is it magical like that? How does that even fit in with the rest of the story? Unless we justify it as something Bilbo would have added to the story. You have to remember, he embellishes things. And I think the best way for us to understand the difficult parts of the story and how they do or don't fit in with the Lord of the Rings and the greater legendarium is that situations like this are expanded on by Bilbo's imagination. Imagine him in this situation, thinking he's absolutely undetectable, he's super quiet, and he reaches in and grabs a purse out of this pocket, this gigantic pocket. And somehow this big troll notices. Maybe the purse even made a sound when it came out of the pocket, the jingling of coins or the rubbing up against the material of the pants or something like that. Or maybe it actually did squeak. And yet in Bilbo's justification later to make this a more entertaining story, which absolutely lines up with making this an interesting story for the readers, he would say that it was a speaking purse. It was magical. Not only because it makes the story more fun and more interesting, but also because it saves a little bit of Bilbo's pride. It wasn't exactly his fault that he failed at the burglary, because of course, how should he have known that the purse was going to speak? And then of course, the trolls notice this, and William says, "Blimey, Bert, look what I've copped." And copped is another wonderful word. The definition is officially to catch or arrest, or to receive or obtain. It's another one of those words we don't use very often, but it's pretty good. And then we get this wonderful line. "What is it?" said the others coming up. "Lummy if I knows. What are you?" Which is so good because the trolls don't even know what Bilbo is. They've never seen a hobbit before. And we're going to get into that on the next episode. So I'll see you next week. Thanks for being here. Thanks for listening to the Lord of the Rings Lorecast. If you'd like to learn more about other fantasy worlds, check out my other podcasts, the Elder Scrolls Lorecast, the Witcher Lorecast, and more at robotsradio.net. If you'd like to reach out, I'd love to hear from you. Send me a note on Twitter at robots_radio, or join our amazing community on the Robots Radio Discord. There are links in the show notes, or just search Robots Radio Discord, or find the link on robotsradio.net. I'll see you next time.